This is PSN Newsrun, streaming exclusively on YouTube.
Nigerian Senate debunks reports of new state creation, and flawed alert on 27 states including the FCT by NIHSA. Stay with us for details of these stories and more. We begin with the Nigerian Senate debunking a viral report claiming it approved the creation of new states, clarifying that no such decision has been made. Here's Tessa Phillips with details.
The Nigerian Senate has officially dismissed viral reports claiming that it approved the creation of new states across the country. The clarification came from Senate President Godswill Akpabio during plenary on Tuesday, following concerns raised by Senator Abdul Ningi. Akpabio stated that while over 42 proposals for state creation have been submitted to the Constitution Review Committee, none have passed the rigorous legislative process required for approval. A widely circulated report from July 17th had falsely claimed that the Senate approved new states across all 6 geopolitical zones, including Ijebu, Adada, Gurara, and Okura. But lawmakers insist these claims are unfounded. Akpabio cautioned communities against holding mobilization meetings or making assumptions about unapproved proposals, stressing that no state has been created by the National Assembly. Earlier, Senator Shehu Buba from Bauchi South also debunked the claims, explaining that the Senate has only conducted public hearings to gather suggestions from Nigerians as part of the ongoing constitutional review process. Lawmakers urged the public to rely solely on official communication from the National Assembly regarding constitutional amendments and state creation efforts. Tessa Phillips, PS News.
Nigeria is leading a new push to establish West Africa's first refined fuel price benchmark in partnership with S&P Global. Joycelyn's got the details on this.
Nigeria has launched a bold initiative to create the continent's first regional pricing benchmark for refined petroleum products. The effort is led by the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority (NMDPRA) in strategic partnership with global analytics giant SP Global Commodity Insights. Chief Executive of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Engineer Farouk Ahmed, highlighted the urgent need for a West African fuel pricing system that reflects the region's own supply realities rather than relying on distant global benchmarks like those from Europe, the US, or Asia. He said, despite being a major producer and growing refining hub, West Africa still imports most of its fuels at prices influenced by external markets that do not consider the region's unique dynamics.
Despite being a significant producer of hydrocarbon resources, an important consumer of refined products, and a growing refining hub, West Africa continues to depend on posted prices of global reference markets such as Northwest Europe, US Gulf Coast, Mediterranean, Singapore, Arab Gulf, for all its trading activities. While these benchmarks are globally accepted, often they do not reflect the unique supply chain peculiarities, market dynamics, and economic realities of the African continent.
Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Oil, Senator Heineken Lekbobiri, outlined government strategies to ensure effective regulation, support investor confidence, and streamline cross-border fuel trade within West Africa. He also highlighted the importance of public-private partnership in scaling refining capacity.
Government's own ambition is to grow this sector. Our own ambition is to support the private sector to grow this sector. Our own ambition is to partner with our neighbors from all over West Africa to make Nigeria the hub.
The Group Chief Executive Officer of the NNPC Limited, Bashir Bayo Ojulari, stressed the company's commitment to supporting regional refining capacity and downstream market growth. He spoke about NNPC's evolving role from national oil monopolist to a catalytic partner in the regional fuel value chain.
The refining paradox of our strategic opportunity. Today, Africa exports the bulk of its crude oil, but imports refined products at a significant premium. This structural asymmetry depletes value, suppresses industrialization, heightens supply vulnerabilities, and compromises energy sovereignty.
Billionaire industrialist and president of the Dangote refinery, Aliko Dangote, highlighted some of the key structural challenges in Nigeria's downstream sector. He noted that, despite significant investment in local refining capacity, imported fuels, many of which fall short of current environmental standards, still dominate the market.
Africa produces approximately about 7 million barrels of crude per day, though we consume only about 4.3 million barrels of petroleum products per day. And quite troubling, we refine just about 40% of that domestically. Most of this production is in Algeria, Egypt, and now Nigeria with the start of the Dangote refinery. In Sub-Saharan Africa, we don't have more than 3 good working refineries.
Vera Blay from S&P Global Commodities Insight offered insight into the global and regional fuel pricing landscape, presenting on how localized indices can mitigate distortions created by reliance on benchmarks like Brent or WTI, enabling West African markets to better reflect regional market dynamics and demand-supply fundamentals.
I think it's worth emphasizing that while we talk here about the development of regional price markers, which I think is the future for this region, the international price assessments have been serving this market really well, and I think have facilitated some of the investment and some of the transparency in pricing. So a lot of that sort of culture, what's needed to develop, has actually come through that process.
The proposed African Pricing Index will promote transparency, improve trade flows, and attract new investment in refining and distribution infrastructure. It's expected to support fairer pricing, real-time market data, and better visibility across the supply chain while encouraging the development of trade zones and digital platforms across Nigeria and its neighbors. Reporting for PS News, Joycelyn Ella Keche Ada.
For the first time, the US is selling more crude oil to Nigeria than it imports, marking a major shift in global oil trade. Let's join Teza for the full scoop.
In a surprising shift that signals changing dynamics in global energy trade, the United States has, for the first time, become a net exporter of crude oil to Nigeria. According to recent data, the United States exported 111,000 barrels of crude per day to Nigeria in February 2025, and increased that volume to 169,000 barrels per day in March. Meanwhile, Nigeria's exports to the United States dropped to near record lows. This reversal is largely driven by 2 key factors. First, ongoing maintenance at United States refineries created a temporary oversupply of crude that needed new destinations. Second, and perhaps more significantly, the launch of the massive Dangote refinery in Lagos has spiked local demand for specific grades of crude, which the United States is well positioned to supply. Experts say this could mark the beginning of a new trend, as Nigeria's refining capacity increases and the country looks to diversify crude inputs. For a nation long known as one of Africa's largest crude exporters, buying oil from America highlights just how fast the global energy map is evolving. Whether this trend continues or normalizes will depend on global refinery operations, local production, and how quickly Nigeria's own oil output recovers. Teza Phillips, PS News.
As Nigeria enters peak rainy season, authorities are sounding flood alarm on 27 states. Joycelyn is on the weather desk.
As Nigeria enters its peak rainy season, authorities are raising the alarm. The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, NIHSA, has issued a flood alert covering 27 states and the Federal Capital Territory, warning of potential heavy rainfall and widespread flooding from now through August 5th. The agency says the threat is higher in low-lying areas, riverbanks, and flood-prone urban centers where drainage systems are poor. States on the high-risk list include Lagos, Rivers, Anambra, Kogi, Bayelsa, Delta, Ogun, and the FCT, amongst others. NIHSA is urging residents in these areas to take preventive measures, clear blocked drainage systems, avoid floodwaters, and stay tuned to official updates. Local governments have also been advised to activate emergency response systems and flood preparedness plans to minimize impact. The warning comes as a stark reminder of past disasters. In 2022, devastating floods claimed over 600 lives and displaced millions across Nigeria, many in areas now listed under the current alert. Experts say climate change, poor infrastructure, and dam mismanagement continue to make Nigeria more vulnerable to seasonal floods. With the rains intensifying, NIHSA's message is clear: be proactive, stay alert, and prioritize safety. Reporting for PS News, Joycelyn Ella Keche Ada.
And now, Joycelyn tells us that millions of dollars worth of US-funded contraceptives are being incinerated in France after Washington blocked efforts to donate them to poorer nations, fueling outrage from global health advocates.
Nearly $10 million worth of US-funded contraceptives, including implants, pills, and IUDs, are being shipped from Belgium to France for incineration. The move follows the Trump administration's freeze on US foreign aid earlier this year, leaving the medical supplies stranded in a Belgian warehouse for months. Despite offers from global family planning groups and the United Nations to repurpose the stock for low-income countries, Washington declined, citing restrictions tied to its reinstated Mexico City policy, a rule that blocks U.S. aid to any organization linked to abortion services. U.S. officials reportedly demanded the supplies be sold at full market value and refused requests to repackage them without U.S. aid branding. The decision has sparked outrage from aid organizations who say it prioritizes politics over public health. Advocacy groups, MSI Reproductive Choices, which offered to cover the cost of rebranding and distribution, said the move feels like an ideological assault on reproductive rights rather than a cost-saving measure. The UN Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, UNFPA, also attempted to purchase the contraceptives, but negotiations fell through, allegedly due to a lack of engagement from US authorities. Now, the supply is set to expire between 2027 and 2031 are being hauled in dozens of truckloads to a French facility that handles medical waste. The destruction itself is expected to cost US taxpayers an additional $160,000. Belgian officials say they explored all possible options to prevent the incineration and still hope for a last-minute solution, though that seems unlikely. US lawmakers have introduced 2 bills to block the destruction, but aid groups doubt they'll be passed in time. For now, the contraceptives meant to prevent unwanted pregnancies in the world's poorest countries are going up in smoke, along with nearly a decade of shelf life and millions in taxpayers' dollars. Reporting for PS News, Joycelyn Ella Keche Ada.
From a last-minute Super Falcons victory to major sports policy changes in the US and key moves in the transfer market, here's your top sports update by Samuel Akpan.
Nigerian Super Falcons have booked their place in the Women's African Cup of Nations final after a dramatic 2-1 win over South Africa. Captain Rasheedat Ajibade opened scoring with a first-half penalty before South Africa equalized through Linda Lothalo in the 60th minute. But when extra time seemed certain, Michelle Aluzie fired in a stunner in the 94th minute, sealing Nigerian spot in the final. The US Olympic and Paralympic Committee has introduced a new policy banning transgender women from participating in women's Olympic events. The move follows an executive order from President Donald Trump titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports." The updated athlete safety policy now includes specific eligibility rules aimed at protecting fair competition in women's categories. Chelsea is making progress in personal talks with Dutch midfielder Xavier Simons. The 22-year-old is set to be open to the move with the discussions ongoing. Meanwhile, Napoli are closing in on Torino goalkeeper Vanja Milanko-Savic after reaching a verbal agreement. The deal is now set in its final stage. And that's it from the Sport Decks. Samuel Akpan for PS News.
You just watched PSN Newsrun, streaming exclusively on YouTube. This is your trusted voice for news that matters. Subscribe, like, share, and stay informed.